Okay, thanks, Erin. So welcome everybody to today's STC Knowledge Exchange. My name is Liz Pohland. I'm STC's Chief Executive Officer, and I'm moderator for your panel today. I'm joined, as she's already said, by Erin Galley, who's STC's Director of Membership and Community Relations. And we also have on staff, and she may be here in the room, Elaine Gillum, who's our Director of Meetings and Convention Operations. So that's the full extent of the STC staff, in addition to some other people who help out with us. Today's session is titled, How Do I Get My First TechComm Job? And we are joined by some very distinguished panelists today, and I will introduce them briefly. James Bousquet. Jim came to technical communication from software engineering and has been writing documents and conducting training in varied industries since 2006. Jim is a past treasurer of STC's Instructional Design and Learning SIG, and a past treasurer and president of STC's Southwestern Ontario chapter. So he's Canadian. He received a Distinguished Chapter Service Award in 2017, and this past June, he rolled off the STC board after serving 2 terms as STC's treasurer. So thank you for being here, Jim. John Garison, who's also with me, has been a technical writer since the 1970s, documenting everything from operating systems to clinical trials applications. Along the way, he was an adjunct professor or instructor in TechComm certificate programs, co-owner of a conference company, and web content manager for a cancer center. He's an STC fellow and works remotely from rural Vermont as lead technical content strategist for Metadata, a Dassault Systems company, world leader in clinical trials software, and very relevant today. And I'm sure he's going to bring that up at some point, that he's worked on some of the vaccine that are here from the pandemic. Mirhonda Studevant, thank you for being here as well. She is a global knowledge management specialist for LinkedIn's trust and safety team. Her TechComm professors introduced her to the STC Atlanta chapter, and she's participated in the society ever since, serving in a variety of leadership roles. She's now proud to be part of the STC Florida chapter. So thank you for being here. So the first thing I'm going to do is ask Erin to start a short poll for everyone in the audience to take a moment to answer some questions. That'll help us understand who's here today and tailor our questions to the audience. So Erin, if you don't mind starting the poll, we'll just take a minute. I think it's just 5 short questions. Oh, and yes, Erin has posted contact information for all of our panelists in the chat, and we'll do that again at the end in case you want to get in touch with them or become connected over LinkedIn. So we'll give you a minute or 2 to fill out the poll. Can everyone see the poll? I don't see anybody participating. Oh, there they go. It's starting to happen. Great. So it looks like we have quite a few members here, but it's not a problem if you're not a member. We're here for everyone. I want to give some good advice to anyone who's interested in TechComm. Looks like we have some relative new people here. So this is going to be great. This is going to be great information for us. So about 70% of you have participated at this point. So Erin, do you think it's slowed down a bit?
Yes, and this will count, that grand total I think is going to count us too. So
okay,
took 5 off the top. So almost everybody has, say, just another minute and we probably will have everybody.
Okay, great. And when you feel like it's ready, just go ahead and publish. Yes, Nathan, your question in the chat, would be okay to make connections LinkedIn with the profiles you've shared. That is exactly why we shared those profiles, is so that you would contact our speakers today and get in touch. You may have follow-up questions that you think of later that they can answer for you.
Okay, so I stopped the poll, but I can now sharing results, so everybody should be able to see just who is here.
Okay, great. So it looks like we have a majority of members, but a handful of people who are not, which is wonderful. Hopefully we'll be able to give you a little bit of information about STC as well. A lot of people are new, which is good too, because that's kind of how we tailored this panel today, was to talk to people who are new in the profession. But of course we welcome anyone to attend. And then the benefits you're most interested in. The last panel we did was kind of similar to this. We had kind of an even mix of everything. So that's helpful for the panelists to know maybe what they should concentrate on when they're talking about their different expertise. And then we have some students and new TechComm folks, a lot of people transitioning, which has been very common lately to the field. So that's good to know. And then topics for future discussion. This is very helpful for me as I continue to curate what we're going to be offering in future months. So thank you for filling that out. Looks like we may end up repeating a couple of these as well because some of the topics are that popular. So thank you everyone for participating in that. That's very helpful. So let's get started. Panelists, are you ready to start? Great. So my first question for you is to ask you to introduce yourself and tell us how you got into TechComm, but also how you found STC. And I'll call on Mirhonda to start.
Thanks so much, Liz. So the way that I got into technical communication is that I actually started undergrad as an industrial engineering major. And I found in my co-op job that all of my engineering studies really didn't mean a lot if I couldn't convey the results of the studies well to other audiences beyond the engineering team. So that's when I learned that there were these people called technical writers, and they were the ones that really bridged the gap between the technical folks and the people in the business and marketing side. So I changed my major and actually got the first undergrad degree that my college awarded in technical and professional communication. And this was back in the mid-90s. And the way that I learned about STC was literally one of my professors in the TCOM department took me to a meeting. I did not have a car and they gave me a ride. So that's how I went to my first STC meeting. And it was just wonderful to just be there in a room with people who were already doing what I aspired to do. That's my story.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's great when you can make those kinds of connections. So Jim, let's go next to you.
Sure. Thanks, Liz. Well, like I saw in the poll that a lot of people are transitioning into tech writing or technical communications in general, and that's similar. That's basically what I did. I've got degrees in biology and systems design engineering. I spent 14 years doing different software roles, testing, development, front ends, back ends, automation. Eventually, the company I was working for was acquired and a few departments were axed, including mine. But I took some time off to travel and volunteer overseas. And I was keen to do something different, but not turn my back on tech entirely. And during that time in mid-2006, I believe, I was driving home from a trip to Ottawa, and I was listening to a radio show where the host was interviewing a group of first-time fiction authors, actually. But some of what they said resonated. I don't think I've got a novel in me necessarily, but I did realize that writing is something that, first of all, I'm good at. Well, actually, it feels like I'm normal at it, right? And other people aren't as good. But not to toot my own horn there, but seriously, I got the impression that, one, that was something I'm good at. B, it's something that I enjoy. It's something I can lose track of time while I'm doing it. So that tells me it's you're doing something you love. And I'd spent a lot of time documenting my own work and helping the Marcom departments with their collateral and reviewing tech docs when a tech writer was around. So I found I really enjoyed that kind of work, and see, someone's willing to pay me to do it. So those three things: I'm good at it, enjoy it, someone's willing to pay me. Most people only get two of those things, right? But I had an opportunity here, I saw, to get all three. So that's how I, decided to transition into it. My first job was as a contractor at a startup that wanted to build an IP portfolio. and needed somebody to write patent documentation, invention disclosures, that's kind of stuff. I'm really analytical, so I'm okay with legalese. A lot of people don't like it. But I found the job through networking. One of the people that I'd been introduced to was a UX designer, and I had lunch with him, and he happened to be starting at this company and told me that it was through him I found out that they were also looking for a writer. So I pitched myself to them as somebody who could write, but at the same time speak the same language as the software developers and relate to them. So transferable skills, if you're transitioning, try to, I don't like the word leverage, but leverage the skills that you've got already in your bag of tricks, and articulate how you can apply them in the new role. So yeah, so eventually they offered me a full-time position and I grabbed it. STC, I learned about STC just before that. It's kind of almost unrelated. The film Helvetica, if you remember that, was in theaters at the time. And someone told me that the local STC chapter, Society for Technical Communication, had organized a private showing. And I thought that sounded pretty cool. But it wasn't until I actually got into tech writing myself that I looked into who these people are and what it was all about and considered joining. And that was a while ago. Here we are now.
Thanks. Tim. Thanks for sharing. I love the movie Helvetica. It's one of my favorites. So John, not last but not least, please tell us about yourself and how you got involved with STC.
Sure thing. So I went to college like a really long time ago. Just to give you a hint, next year will be my 50th college reunion. So I'm old. I started college in 1968, and I was not sure what I wanted to do, but I knew I could write well. I had done some of that in high school, writing for the high school newspaper and stuff like that. And so I started taking English courses, and I found out I took a couple of philosophy courses and really liked that, and ended up with a double major in English and philosophy. And in retrospect, looking back on it, it's like the perfect background, as far as I can tell, to become a tech writer, because you learn to deal with very abstract things, so that if you can tease apart all the arguments in Immanuel Kant's epistemology, and understand that, it's all a tenuous set of rules. If you change something here, you can follow up and see what the results are out there. That's software. Software doesn't have any existence. It's zeros and ones on a spinning disk. No, it's a series of rules. So if you can understand philosophy and keep that in your head, and then if you have an English degree and know how to write, what better preparation can one get for technical writing as a career? Now, this was all before there were any that I knew of, and I'm still not sure if there were any at that time, tech writing programs at colleges. So anyway, I took all this and figured out, what can I do? At one point in my life, I was given two opportunities. I could join a company that made radioactive stuff that they stick in your veins, and they can follow x-rays and see where they go and where the blockages are. And the other was to work for a software company. I took the one that you're not exposed to radiation in, and I became a customer service representative for a financial company, still in business, huge database of ancient, old stock information, bond, commodities, the whole 9 yards. So I was answering the phone and basically reading the user instructions to a lot of people on the phone. But I also was, I wanted to learn more. So I tried to learn more and ask questions of anybody who would stand me for 5 minutes and answer a question. And at one point, one of the tech writers at the company quit. And the tech writing manager said, "Hey, you've got an English degree. You know how to write. How would you like to be a tech writer?" And it was like I found my tribe. And that's kind of it in a nutshell. And so I got started with STC. Well, back in 1982, I was working for Wang Labs. They've been out of business now for well over 20 years. But they were like the first word processing company. I mean, they were the word processing company back in the 70s and 80s and into the 90s as well. And so I was working there, and that year, STC had its annual conference in Boston, where I was. And they were a corporate member, so all the writers were able to were STC members, and so I managed to get a chance to go to the conference, and I met people, and just it was like, oh, this is the tribe of my tribe, and that was it for me. I've been in and active pretty much ever since.
Thank you so much to each of you. I always learn something new about people that I've known for a while when I do these introductions. Okay, so our next question. What advice can you provide those new to the profession on finding their first TechComm job? Where and how should they look for jobs in technical communication? So this time I'll start with Jim.
Sure, thanks, Liz. Where am I to start? Well, first of all, don't rely on job postings. By the time a job gets posted, it's going to get hundreds of applicants, and it may be hard for yours to stand out, or more difficult anyway. Instead, try to find jobs that haven't been posted yet. So network. I know, back when I was looking for my first role, that kind of scared me a little bit. I wasn't really somebody who likes to put themselves out there and toot their own horn and go cap in hand to my friends asking for but seriously, increase your visibility. Let people know that you're looking, and what you're looking for. That's really key. People may know that you're looking for a job, but they're much less likely to come back with something if they don't know what you're looking for. But if they do, then when they do find a match, then maybe, oh yeah, that Jim guy was talking about, wanting a role in TechComm. Maybe he'd be interested in this. Not everybody that you network with is going to get back to you, but that percentage that does, they need to know what you're looking for. So make it easy for them. Let them know what you want, and ask them to let you know if they hear anything. That can, if you work through them, they might even be able to get your application, your resume to the hiring manager and at the top of the pile. That's really important. I mean, for example, just today, I found out that one of my colleagues at my work this is her last week. So it could be a couple of weeks before a job posting appears. But in the meantime, I can tell my networking acquaintances, and I do have one right now who's looking, and I'm going to, all about the job. She can start tweaking her resume. I can get it to the hiring manager along with a good word or two, because I've worked with her before. And if it's a good fit, the manager might even decide not to bother with the full-blown hiring process, because it can be a lot of work for her, and she's busy. So, and of course, it doesn't have to be just for deck writing roles either. I could do the same thing for a software QA opening that I happen to know is coming up, or an EA role. You get the idea. But for tech writing in particular, the same thing applies. So it's important also to follow up with your network. When you speak to somebody, give them a couple of weeks, and then touch base with them again later. It's important that you keep yourself in their minds, so to speak. Just let them know what progress you've had. Let them know that you're still looking, what's been happening. Keep track of your follow-ups with a spreadsheet if you need to. And you should need to, like you should be talking to that many people if you can, and get them to introduce you to other people who might be able to help you, and so on. As I say, that's how I got my first job as a tech writer. That's how I've gotten all of my jobs as a tech writer. And as a trainer. All of my TechComm jobs have been through people I know who happen to know that I was looking, because I told them, and people are happy to help this way. It's not like you're going cap in hand. I've helped other people as well, and it really feels good. So don't feel as though you're sort of begging or I can't think of the word for it, but don't feel bad about it. You're giving people an opportunity to help, and a lot of people nowadays really want to help. And are happy to. So giving them an opportunity. That's my advice.
Thanks, Jim. That's really good advice. I agree with all of that. Mirhonda, what's your take on this?
I thoroughly second Jim's advice. A while ago, I actually did a presentation to STC Florida about job search survival. And that's the number one thing, is to let people know that you're looking. Sometimes pride or ego will get in the way and we want to kind of do it on our own and not let anyone know. But to me, that's the absolute number one thing. Other things I can think of is to consider contract and temp opportunities. A lot of times those will allow you to get your feet wet, to see about the environment and to see what it is that you really like. It doesn't have that same level of long-term commitment, but if it's something that you enjoy, it does have that potential. A lot of times there are temp to permanent jobs that allow you to really have exposure. You get to learn about different systems, you get to network and meet people, and basically you're paid to learn. So I think that sometimes it's, instead of going for the permanent full-time, full commitment, marriage, if you will, for a while, let's date this company. Let's see if we like what's going on and how they operate. The other thing I thought about is just having a mental model. So part of it is about knowing yourself and the environments in which you thrive. Do you like being part of a smaller group where you may get to wear more hats? Do you want to be part of a really large company that's extremely structured and organized? And then my last piece of advice is about the job title itself. Because technical communication is so broad, there are lots of jobs that involve different aspects of TCOM that people either may not think of as technical communication jobs, or it may not have the same title. Every technical writer is not a technical writer as their job title. So pay more attention to the responsibilities of the job, more so than the title, because there are content developers, information developers, content designers, knowledge-based content developers, instructional designers. There are all manner of job titles. So really focus more on your skills as well as what the position entails. That would be my advice there.
Thanks, Mirhonda. That's great advice. We certainly know from our membership that people have very different job titles, but they're all doing very similar work regardless. So thank you for mentioning that. So I see questions in the chat, but I'm going to let John go, and then we'll come back to some of those questions on this topic.
Thanks. Let me second everything Jim and Mirhonda said, because they're right on target. But then a couple of other things. I know, Mirhonda, you work for LinkedIn, so I'm gonna tout your company for you. Get a LinkedIn profile. Absolutely, one of the first things you should do is get that. And that way you can meet people, ask them to join your network. That I call it merging your networks, because you get access to all of the people that they know, and so on. And like, for example, I have over 1,000 people in my network. So it's, it can be a real thing. Then in that LinkedIn, you can post, hey, I'm looking for a job. I have expertise in this area, doing this sort of thing. And all of those people will be able to see your post, and perhaps it will strike a chord. There are lots of places to begin to look. I mean, there are ads or people posting, I should say, on LinkedIn. There are groups on LinkedIn, tech writing groups. Find one. They're just Google them, look at them, look for them in LinkedIn. You'll find the groups. Join those if you want to. STC has a Slack channel that I believe is open to pretty much anybody. There is a jobs posting channel in the Slack, STC Slack. Good place to look. If you're in a company and want to change jobs, does your company have a tech writing group? Well, go make friends with somebody there. Let them know you're interested. Ask them, hey, how do I get in? If you're really brand new, ask them if there's something that they could give you to do as a project that you could then show them. Hey, here's my ability. Here's how here I can write. And I understand the company and the product. So you've got a leg up on anybody coming in from the outside. That's a good place. If there's nothing in your company, what other companies in your industry where the products and the problems and the issues that people have to deal with? What other companies out there would you consider going for? I mean, this is not necessarily a direct competitor, but somebody in the same area, because you have something to sell, to offer them, which is called industry knowledge. Use that to your advantage. And if there's anyone like I think Jim said it really well, anyone who's working in a company who might have a tech writing slot open, let them know that you're looking. You never know. Get involved online. The way I got my current job, I was on, this goes back to tech whirlers. There's a bulletin board kind of thing online. Somebody, a friend of mine, David Farby, who I had known for years and years and years online, we had never met. He was posting a job at his company. I said, hey, I'm interested, sent him my resume, interview, hired. He left the company before I ever met him, but we did meet up. He's in the UK. I was doing a presentation over there, and we actually did meet one time. So it's all about the people. And no matter what job you do, no matter what industry you do, people are going to be a major component of it. And if you can make those connections and get to know people, whether they're tech writers, whether they're programmers, whatever, use that. Because every time somebody moves, leaves, goes somebody else, they extend your network into a new company. You have to think of it that way. And one other tip too, I don't want to take up all the time here, but if you're looking for a tech writing job and you see a company that's hiring programmers, guess what? They're going to need somebody to explain what those programmers are doing. So even if they haven't been advertised for a tech writing job, send them a resume. That's it.
Great, thanks, John. So there's some questions in the chat that I think I'm going to wait on until we get through a couple of more of my questions, because I think some of my questions will address some of the questions that are in the chat, and if not, we'll go back to them at the end. So my next question for the panelists are, what are 2 to 3 skills you believe every technical communicator should be able to list on their resumes? And what are employers looking for when they read resumes? Mirhonda, start with you.
So something that I think we've all alluded to in our responses is just about, I think Jim said it outright, is about being analytical. That is truly important in terms of being a technical communicator, because you're actively acting as the translator between various audiences. So you have to be able to analyze, understand your audience, and it really is important to have that analytical eye for detail. I think the other part is just being organized and effectively having project management skills, because you will be managing your own project inside of a project a lot of times. So for some people, depending on your corporate culture, the technical writing piece, whatever documentation you're creating and delivering, is like the magic thing that happens. People may task you with it and then may not ask you any other questions until it's time for it to actually be delivered. So you have to be able to effectively manage your own projects. But at the core of everything is the fundamental writing skill. You have to be able to convey ideas, no matter how technically complex. You have to be able to convey those ideas clearly to your target audience. It's sort of like the analogy that I've heard for a long time about how an engineer may give you all of the full schematics and details about the car that they've designed, and they may have lots of details about how the carburetor works, but the person driving the car, do they care about the carburetor? Not really. They just want to know how to actually drive and use the car. So that's really, in effect, what you're doing is extracting the part that's important to your target audience. So I think that those skills are really essential. There was a second part to that question, Liz. Would you remind me of what that was?
What are employers looking for when they read resumes?
Oh, the great question. So when I've been on the hiring end of things, I am looking for someone who is self-motivated, who has what they call a high locus of control, which means that you have a strong sense of the way that you will influence outcomes. So a lot of times, if people are asking situational questions in an interview, it's because they're really trying to ascertain and determine, are you someone that blames and basically makes other things, makes issues something that someone else owns, or do you take ownership and do you find ways to accomplish what you need to despite whatever extenuating circumstances, even if there's a tight deadline, even if it's a monumental task. So I think that beyond the technical capability and things that we'll get to as far as being able to perform the job is really the attitude that you bring to it. And are you essentially someone who is able to take initiative and have strong levels of ownership? Great questions. Thanks, Liz.
Yeah, you're welcome. And thank you for the great answer. Okay, John, how about you? Do you have an answer to this?
Oh, I've got an answer for everything, Liz. And actually, that's kind of one of the things that you need as a tech writer is you do need to be able to think on your feet. And honestly, if there is a superpower that tech writers need, in my opinion, it's the ability to look at a software application design and be able to figure out how to use it without any instructions. And that is really key because if you're writing the documentation, there isn't anything to read. You're pretty much guided by what you can see, and you have to be able to figure out and intuit what it is and be able to take care of it. Second superpower of a tech writer is how to bring order out of chaos. Because when you get in there, there's all sorts of stuff. It's in random order. Some of it's good, some of it's bad, some of it's all over the place. You have to be able to kind of get it together and tease out the important bits. Can't say enough about those two things because those kind of built in. And you have to be able to write clearly, as Mirhonda said, and I'm sure Jim will say, if you can't write a cogent, active voice, directive sentence, and be able to explain to somebody how to make a peanut butter sandwich, then that's something you got to work on. It may not be born in you. I know my first job, my editor was beating me about the head and shoulders regularly about use of passive voice, and I had to go and manually by hand change every sentence to active voice. Let me tell you, I write an active voice out of the box now because I don't want to have to go through that exercise again. So, but learn how to do that. Learn how to write clear instructions because that's a big, big, big part of the job. The other part is explaining the concepts behind it. That takes a little bit more, it's much more nuanced, and it takes a while to develop the skill to be really able to do that. But those two things. And so about what people look for on a resume. Keep in mind that your resume is going to be your first writing sample that anybody sees. No typos, no punctuation errors. It's got to look good, good use of white space, clear language. The 3 C's in tech writing: clear, concise, and correct. Be focused on those. And just as another thing, I know as a hiring manager in my past, people don't want to see a lot of, a year here, 18 months here, a year there in full-time positions, because it just doesn't give me a good, solid feeling that somebody is, either they're bored and want to keep going, or they're not good, or whatever. It just sends why is this person moving around so much? So we'll go back to what I said in the previous question. If you're looking for a job, if you can stay within the same company and change jobs, that's like ideal, because you get like longer term in the position, and the ability to make a change like that. Those are good signals to hear, good signals to see. And one other thing is, and you can't put attitude on a resume, but you can kind of indicate your flexibility, because that's also a critical skill that people need. Be able to move with the wind and the flow as things change, because change is inevitable and is going to be there forever. So,
Great, thanks, John. I think that's very true. I think the ability to adapt in this industry especially is definitely a critical skill. So Jem, how about you on resumes? Oh, you're muted.
I knew I would do that at some point. Yeah, I totally agree about coping with change. Just about every job I've had, and it seems to be not letting up. It's a real trend that deadlines change, requirements change, customers change their minds. Some industries are worse than others for that, but it really is something that a lot of managers understand that that's what's going on, but we have to find people who are okay at coping with it and not doing the blaming and complaining, as Mirhonda and John were talking about. I totally second everything that they were saying about highlighting things on your resume that show that you're analytical, you take initiative and ownership of things. Being able to figure things out quickly, I think, is huge. And making sense out of an information mess. It sort of feeds into information architecture, kind of, and writing clearly too. Like, yeah, you'd think that would be a given when somebody becomes a tech writer, but it's not necessarily. So people have to make a point of showing that. I'd add to those things also lifelong learning. Like if you can show that you're interested in things, you can get passionate about different stuff. You have the ability to pick things up quickly. That can tell a manager that you're not going to be using a lot of subject matter experts' time. You're not going to be going to the developers asking them to explain things that maybe you could have found out on your own. Without a whole lot of help. You will have to spend time with them, and that's an important skill. To be able to interview the subject matter experts and get the information that you need out of them, but to be able to do that respecting their time and doing it in an efficient way. That's also one thing that I would add to what John and Mirhonda had to say already. I'd also like to point out in a last year, the July-August issue, I looked this up. It's the of Intercom, the one that has the dragon boat on the cover. Jack Molisani wrote a great article there about beating the sinister ATS, it's called. The ATS being an applicant tracking system or an application tracking system. I can't remember which, but there's some great info there. I know Jack is busy with LavaCon today, but he would probably have a few things to say about this topic as well, I'm sure. But tailor your resume, make tweaks to it to address keywords in the job description, if there is one. Because when I think of particular things that you should make sure on a resume, make sure that job, whether it's from a posting or from one of your networking associates, that whatever you can find out about the job, try to tailor your resume for that. Employers can see when you're just throwing in a generic resume that contains a lot of information that may not necessarily apply in their context, and that can be a signal that you're not really putting in a lot of effort. But if they can see that, yeah, this person is either an amazing match or he or she has gone to the trouble of they really want this job, essentially, is the message that sends. And the better match between your resume and the job, of course, the better your chances of landing an interview. So, one thing I also tell people is don't think of your resume as something that will get you a job. Think of it as something that gets you an interview, that gets you noticed for an interview. And then once that happens, it's not so much about your resume anymore, it's about your interview skills. So that's probably that could be a whole other knowledge exchange session. Sure.
And you mentioned Jack, so I'll say we did invite him to this, but of course he does run his own conference right now. So he is going to come to another one, and we'll probably, given the number of questions we're getting for you guys, have another knowledge exchange on this topic. Exactly. A couple people have asked about portfolios, and my next question is about portfolios. Do TechComm applicants need a portfolio for an interview? If they do, what should they include, especially if they haven't had any prior experience? What could they put together to create a portfolio? And what advice do you have, if you haven't already said so, about the interview process? John, let's start with you.
Okay. Yeah, you should have something. If you're going for a writing job, you need to be able to demonstrate some ability to actually write and put something together. So how do you do this if you're not a writer? Well, what does your current job do? Just say you're working in whatever job it is, and you want to get a tech writing job. Think about what you do, and what would you write down to give to a temp who is going to take your job while you're on maternity or paternity leave. You're gone for 3 months. They're going to have to do pretty much everything that your job is for 3 months. What would you tell them? How would you describe your job, whatever it is? And you know that right there, it's something you know that you can explain, and it would make what almost doesn't matter what it is you're doing. It would be a pretty good portfolio piece. So there's one. Let's see. And if you're worried about, if you have something that you've already written and it's for a company, you may need to be very careful about what you can and can't say with that company's name on it. So de-identify the company, change it to ABC Company or whatever, and remove anything that is a product name or, you know, but focus on whatever it is, the content and so on. You may have to change some things, but that, if you already have something that's written up like that, that too could be used as something that you could show. If you don't have that, find out some way to volunteer to do something. If you're part of a group, you know, you have a bunch of friends and you do like dinners going from place to place. How do you organize that? How do you schedule that? How do you communicate that? Here, you know, here's a, and label it as kind of a how to set up a dinner party circuit, you know, and it's in a set of instructions. Almost anything can be turned into a set of instructions. There is an organization and a website called Tech Writers Without Borders. It has people, most of them in third world countries, who have developed software applications that they are, you know, want to get out to the rest of the world. They don't have documentation. They're looking for anybody to come in and help them explain what it is that they're doing. I looked at it a while ago. I've never taken advantage of it myself, but look there. I don't think that you may not get paid. It may be volunteer. You may get paid a little bit, but you're not in it for the money at this point. You're in it for the experience and the portfolio piece that you can get out of it. So that would probably qualify. Interview tips. First and foremost, be yourself. What you don't want to do, the worst possible thing you can do, is start answering questions the way you think somebody wants to, with the answer you think they want to hear. Because then if they hire you, they think that's who they're getting. But if that's not who you are, it's not going to be a fit. It's not going to take long for them to realize, wait a minute, this person sounded completely different in the interview than they are now. What else don't we know? Yeah, and you probably won't like it either. So really, you know, having a job is good, but having a good job and one that's a good fit is far and away much better. So stay true to who you are and what you want to do and how you feel and how you believe. Even if it's a virtual interview, as many of them are today, put on a clean shirt. Wear like real pants. Don't wear sweatpants. Feel like you're gonna, you know, you're going in for an interview. You know, make it special. So those are just a couple of things. And at some point, I'm sure we must have a full interviewing course because there's a lot more to it than this. But these are just a couple of things off the top of my head, and I'm sure Jim and Mirhonda will pitch right in.
I'm sure they will. So thanks, John. Yeah, and we're getting close to the top of the hour, and I want to be cognizant of everyone's time. So, Mirhonda, what ideas do you have on this topic?
Okay. I'll try to be quick, but really a lot of people come into technical communication because they become like the de facto go-to person for everything else they're involved in where there's communication involved. So it may be something with a PTA group with your kids, but if you find that you are the communicator and the person that explains things and helps people in your family and your social circles and organizations, that just shows that you have that propensity and capacity, and it's just a matter of formalizing. As far as the portfolio, when I was in school, again, I didn't have any initial items to include, but there are lots of rewrite opportunities because I think a lot of people that are inclined in this field are editing all the time. Even when you're not conscious, you're like constantly see things around you that need to be edited, and there are things that you can rework. So there are actually the potential for projects all around you, depending on what type of discipline you want to go in within technical communication. You can take a menu and redesign the menu. That's graphic design. That's information design. You can take something that you receive in the mail and you can recreate that. And it's basically just trying to find, because it's less about it's about the design and about your writing capability. So you can take something and improve upon it and then create that as a portfolio piece. The other part is I've seen some things in the chat about using papers and that kind of thing. Think of your portfolio as a collection of samples. So it's not that you need to create some huge body of work or have some long extended information that you include, but you want to have samples. And essentially, I have a digital and a paper-based portfolio. The digital one is so I can include that in my resume so people can see things that I have done and different types of writing and different types of deliverables. But then I also take the hard copy one, and that allows me in a 3-ring binder to mix and match. And I can just pull in whatever pieces are relevant to that particular role. If I'm interviewing for something as an online help person, I'm going to be showing online help in my portfolio. They're not going to be interested in the, fantastic newsletter layout I did. So having that portfolio and having information that you can just switch in and out just gives you that flexibility again. And then my interview tip is just that it's a two-way street. So not only should you show up as your authentic self, but also be sure to ask questions. I have been on that hiring and that interviewing position. And when I get to the portion of the interview where I ask, are there any questions that you have for me? And some people say no. And I'm like, really? I know I'm not that good. So be sure that you consider the interview. It's an opportunity. It's a two-way street. It's not just about that potential employer liking and accepting you, but it's also about whether this is an environment where you're going to thrive. So much for my short answer, but I think that covers it, Liz.
No, it's really helpful, and I agree with you. I always think it's a mistake when candidates don't ask the company questions because, as you said, it's your chance to learn about them as much as they're learning about you. So Jim, I'll go to you, and I'll also mention that someone in the chat has asked how many years of material should be in a portfolio. So if you're not new and creating a portfolio, maybe how far back should you go? If you could maybe address that too, Jim. You're muted again.
I'm fired. Oh boy. Yeah. So portfolios. I'll just start by saying that with your question about whether we need a portfolio, even. I mean, personally, I haven't needed a portfolio except for my current job, and I've had 5 or 6 TechComm jobs. 2 of them were as trainers, and for one of those, I did have to develop and lead a quick session about a healthcare IT standard that the company had to adhere to. That was for one of those, but maybe I've just been lucky. But I do know lots of people who haven't needed a portfolio at their job. but as John says, be ready, like have one in your back pocket, because it can take a while to put together. And, you know, if you find out that the interview that you've got next week is going to want one, you know, you're going to want to be preparing for the interview, not scrambling around trying to, you know, find documents and put them together and format things. Yeah, I think John and Mirhonda have already made some really good points about editing things if they're confidential. There are different strategies you can take. If you're new and you've got no experience, there's a variety of things you can do, as Mirhonda said. But with regards to what's in it, I'm personally, I'm not a hiring manager, but I wouldn't be that concerned about your history. Like, what can you do for me now is more what I'm interested in. If something is 8 or 10 years old, I wouldn't be too concerned about having a mix over time, so much as a mix over perhaps large scale document, small scale document, something that's a lot less formal, something that is formal. It kind of, anyway, my point is to include a variety of things that way. And you want to try to at least have some of your portfolio line up with the kind of work that the role is going to entail. So, for example, if you're in a Marcom kind of a role that you're looking at versus writing manuals for the aviation industry or the pharmaceutical industry, those are going to be very specific and descriptive and precise. Versus on the Marcom side, you might want to show that you've got the skills to write something more persuasive. So those are the kinds of things that I would suggest for portfolios. But as I say, with the caveat that I haven't had to use them much. Yeah, so that's basically what I have to say about portfolios.
Great, thanks, Jim. And I'll also say that in the chat, there was some advice about not including necessarily a date on your writing samples or in your portfolio, because it doesn't matter when you wrote it necessarily, but that you can and that you've done that kind of work, not regardless of when. In my opinion, learning to write and working in TechComm, you don't lose skills. It's not like riding a bike where you might forget how to ride the bike at some point. It's always with you. And so any item you have will count. So Aaron Galilee, I know you're here, and I had 2 more questions, but we're running out of time. So we're going to have to do another panel, obviously. But in the last 4 or 5 minutes, if you can help me find some questions that were asked early on that I can pose, because I would definitely want to get to some of the questions of the attendees. Do you have 1 or 2 you could read out for me?
Sure, absolutely. Let's see. Oh no, I had it and then I scrolled. I accidentally bumped my scroller and I moved it.
Well, I know there was a question about ageism and
yes,
concerns about ageism. So since that was brought up, maybe we could address that really quickly, because that's a very important topic. Anybody?
As an old person, I got hired in my current job when I was age 61. That was 10 years ago. So I don't really think that age is a barrier in and of itself. I think the bigger barrier is attitude. I know a lot of people who think that, well, I've been doing this for 40 years. I can't learn anything from you young punk kids anymore. Killer. Don't do that. Have a positive, upbeat attitude. Be positive. Be self-deprecating. Don't take yourself too seriously. Play well with others. Share your toys. Share your knowledge. Those are the kinds of things that will actually make an older person a real asset for them to hire, not a way to keep people out. Just real quickly.
Okay. I have a question from Danny. It's going back to networking with your contacts. So do you have any suggestions for letting network contacts know you're looking for a job when you don't have a working relationship with them and they're not familiar with the quality of your work, sorry. So
sort of like a blind.
Yeah, so you're new, they might not know you that well, but good connection perhaps.
If I can take that one. When I started this process back, for my first TechComm job, and I started doing the networking thing that I'd read so much about. Yeah, you start with your friends, but they're going to introduce you to people who may introduce you to people, and so on, and that's exactly what happened. So I guess it's a little bit more difficult to do nowadays, but I was going for lunch, going for coffee with people who up until that point were strangers to me, but they'd had to look for a job themselves. So we just had that immediate, back and forth. They knew what I was trying to get from them, and I knew what I was trying to extract from them, either just to get to know them, help them know me, what it is that I'm looking for, any advice that they would have. So a lot of the same kinds of questions as people are asking in this session, for example. We didn't have this back then. I didn't know about STC back then. Yeah, it's I guess, long story short, you just have to put yourself out there. It felt a little bit strange for me at first as an introvert, but you get used to it. And as I said earlier, people are, you could probably think of people who aren't, but everybody I encountered, people are happy to help. And just make sure you follow up and thank them. Pick up the tab for coffee or whatever, if that's what you're doing. Yeah, if they, I guess the answer is, if they don't know you already and they don't know your work, then you have to put yourself out there and tell them about yourself and tell them about your work.
Yep.
I hope that helps.
Yeah, I think that does help, and that's good advice. I just want to say thank you to everyone for attending. We're at the top of the hour. Panelists, I don't know if you have another few minutes to answer a few more questions if people want to stay on. But I did want to thank all the attendees. If you need to go, that's fine. We understand. But there have been so many great questions. I'd love to give the panelists a chance to answer some more of them. So Erin, do you have another you want to ask?
Sure. And as just a reminder, this will be recorded. So if you're missing it, you have to log off and you're missing anything, you can come back and catch the end for additional questions you might miss. Do you have any resources for helping folks narrow down types of opportunities in TechComm that might be more naturally a good fit or of interest? I know a bit about TechComm from education, but guessing there's a lot I don't know about what's out there, and I can feel a bit lost trying to find a good fit within a company or an industry. So I guess narrowing it down to find a job of where to go. And that's from Nathan.
Yeah, I guess he's asking because there's so many jobs with so many different requirements. How do you
Where you start?
Yeah. Anybody have a thought on that?
Well, depends. Nathan, I don't know what your background is, but it sounds kind of almost like you're a teacher coming out of education or something. Look for instructional design. They're the ones who actually design courses to teach classes to people. Well, what have you been doing, for your career as a teacher, other than doing classes and structure, learning plans, all of that sort of thing. That's one thing. And other than that, I'm not sure how you can. A lot of times, honestly, looking at job ads for writers, they don't really tell you what the subject matter is, what the application is. Sometimes you can pick it up, but most of the time they're just saying, hey, look, I want somebody who knows how to be a tech writer. And that's not really helpful. So.
Okay, thank you. Erin, is there another one or two? It was going by so fast for me that I've had trouble keeping up with all the comments and questions. But there've been it's been a great activity in the chat, so that's good to see.
It may be something that you can talk about, Liz. We've had a couple questions about salary and just salary requirements. I didn't know if you wanted to bring up the salary database, of places to look for reference for that.
Sure, and I'm sure the panelists can talk about, entry-level salaries and what they might be. But we do publish, STC does publish a document called the Salary Database. It's a survey from the Bureau of Labor Statistics and information about jobs all across the US, and we also include some Canadian data. We are putting that together for this year. We did not do one last year because of the pandemic and how different everything was going to be. So we're going to be doing one in the next couple of months, but we do have older copies, of course. If you're a member, you can get access to. But if you aren't a member yet, or you're just become one, that will be coming soon. And we'll give you, depending on where you're located and the kind of work you do, an idea of what you should be being paid in your area. John, Jim, Mirhonda, do you want to add anything to salary questions?
I would very much like to, because one of the things, one of the questions we didn't get to is what's changed since the pandemic. And the biggest thing that I can see that's changing is that people are now aware of the fact that professional people can work quite successfully from home. And the one effect that that has had is expanded greatly the opportunities for people. No longer do you have to live within commuting distance of a company's office. You can live anywhere. I live in rural Vermont, you know, for God's sakes. There's nothing around here for a long ways. Yet I have worked remotely for the last 12, 13 years. And that alone will allow you a great deal, you know, your potential market has exploded. So there's really very few exclusions out there. And tech writing, honestly, is one of those professions that you can be. I used to say that I can do everything from my home office that I could if I was in the office, except go and look and see if someone is at their desk. And if I really needed to, I could get somebody to tell me that. There's nothing else I can't do. I have, you know, Slack, I have email, I have chat, I have Zoom. There, you know, and honestly, when you're in an office, most of your communications with other people are by email or Slack or Zoom anyway. So being away, being someplace else doesn't really enter into it. So just consider the world literally as your potential employment.
Right. Someone else in the chat has asked about how frequent or how common remote work is for technical communication. My understanding is it's always been a part of most businesses, because often there are people across, if you work for a large corporation, there are going to be people in other cities and other countries you're working with, but maybe someone could address the remote side of it. And I'm glad you brought up the pandemic, because it has made a difference in the job market for.
I'll let somebody else talk.
All right, I have another question about a job posting. We're ready for one?
Well, wait, just a second. I was going to give them a chance to talk about
sorry.
the remote positions and how frequent those are. Have you all worked in remote, Mirhonda?
Sure. I put something in the chat, but similar to what John was saying, there's just that opportunity, and what you said as well, Liz, that just because of the nature of the work, you're already relationship building, and you have to work with people who may or may not be in the same physical space as you, depending on the size of the organization that you're in. So the nature of this work really does lend itself to a remote employee. So then enter the pandemic, and I think what it did was it amplified that opportunity. And even in organizations where remote or virtual work was something that was frowned upon, it sort of pushed the needle, like it forced a situation where more people had to be remote. But for me personally, I've been, at least when I say partially remote, I mean hybrid, where I may be working from home a few days a week and in the office a few days a week. That's really been the case for the majority of my career. There's only 2 employment situations I can think of where I had to be on site all day, every day. And with the pandemic accelerating that, there is a much higher likelihood of being remote, but that also means that when we were talking about your attitude and what you're doing in terms of positioning yourself, part of that positioning is creating a space where you can work and where you can focus. So whatever that looks like in your home environment is something that you have to really think about, and as well as your own personality. Some people really thrive on being in the office and collaborating and getting out of the house. but technical communicators tend to be introverts, and we're totally okay, a lot of us, with just finding a really good quiet place where we can just focus and actually get some, get a lot of work done without having to do some of the water cooler conversations and some of the other things that occur just that are a little distracting when you're on site in the office. So I think just given the nature of our work, it's something that's preferred and that employers recognize that. Yeah, Danny, I had to go there with the water cooler.
Thanks, Mirhonda. That's a great response.
Just to add one more perspective, up until the pandemic, I was always working in the office, if only because that's what people did and that's what was expected. I didn't do a whole lot. Let's see, I had one contract where I did that remotely, but anywhere where I've worked with software in particular, working from home is an option, but people generally only did it if they were sick or something and you didn't want to go into the office. On the other hand, I just want to point out, if you're working with software, that's one thing. If you're doing work with hardware, so I mentioned aviation before, I've worked at a company that did automation machinery. For those kinds of things, you may need to go into the office at least part of the time, so that you can go into the shop and actually look at machines, talk to the tool makers, take photos. These are things that you can't do from home. Well, you may be able to speak to subject matter experts, but that can be really difficult if they spend most of their time out on the shop floor. Software, that kind of tech, that's a whole other ballgame. That's certainly generally a lot easier to do from home. And as John and Mirhonda pointed out, that it's become more apparent now. The data is out there that for managers that yes, you can trust people to actually work when they're at home. Some of them might not be as happy working that way, but as Mirhonda pointed out, a lot of us in TechComm are introverts anyway, so we're fine, being at home on our own for much of the day. And people are using the tools more too, the collaboration tools. That's things that were possible to use before, but people just generally didn't in favor of face-to-face communications. Whereas now I think it's a bit more normal to communicate online.
Thanks, Jim. That's a good point. Erin, you had one more question, and then I think we have to let our panelists go back to their real lives, as much as they may enjoy being here with us. Did you have one more you wanted to ask?
Yes, and I did want to state that just for the good of the group, I did place a quick sheet in in the chat of just STC's membership benefits. So some of the things that we talked about, the links and such, should be there for you to easily locate. And if you have questions about STC, please contact us. And while this last question is being answered, I'm going to go ahead and replace the LinkedIn profile links for all of our panelists and some emails for us in membership, just how to reach out to us. So you can do that in your notes as they're answering the final question. So just keep an eye out for that as we're going through.
Right. So I know we didn't get to everyone's questions. So if there's a question you want to ask the panelist or me or Erin, please reach out to us after the session. We'd be happy to help.
Okay, so the final question I have is, job postings sometimes have skill requirements that you don't have or were not exposed to in school. Almost with a major firm, and they did not advertise that they would train. Later, I found out they hired graduates with no experience. How do we sort out that when navigating job opportunities? That was a question from Joanna.
Jim, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I would vote that go ahead and apply for those kinds of jobs. If only because you never know. If it's the kind of job where that's not going to consider you unless you tick every single box. If the hiring people have the luxury to look for that, they've got either the number of people or the right kind of people applying for the jobs, then yeah, you're not going to get that job. But you don't know, and I think a lot of jobs will list things. Let me put it this way: they'll often list skills and tools. skills, personality traits, those kinds of things, those are kind of more hardwired. If you don't have tools though, say you're working in, you've got experience in FrameMaker, but this job is a flare shop. I think most HR people and most hiring managers realize that tools can be learned. If you've already learned some other similar tool, chances are very good to 100% that the person will be able to pick up the tools that we use. So don't be put off by that sort of thing. That's what I would say.
That's good advice.
Yeah,
John?
I'd agree with Jim on that, except one of the things, this was an earlier question about resumes and so on. And Liz, you alluded to Jack Molisani's kind of beat the I can't remember the exact term he used, but resumes, when you would submit them, especially to really large companies, get scanned and examined for keywords. And if they ask for a particular tool and that tool is not on your resume, you could get chucked out just for that alone. So maybe one way of saying it is, I'm very expert in FrameMaker, but I have some exposure to Madcat Flare, did blah, 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 blah. Because then those words are in your resume, but they're also clarified. So just a little quick.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And or to say, I'm really excited to learn, these other, and just having them on there, you're right. It will potentially keep you in the pile, but it also shows that you know what the other tools that are similar are. Especially if you're applying for a job where maybe they're using all freeware and not paid software, for example. It's important for you to know what other tools are comparable. And we're going to do a tools session too for a knowledge exchange. So if you're interested in knowing more about tools, that's coming up next month. And we have 3 very interesting people doing that session. So let me close things out. I know there have been a lot more questions and we haven't been able to get to them all, but that's a really good sign because that means we need to do another session on this topic. So John, Jim, and Mirhonda, my heartfelt thank you to all of you for attending. It feels like we got a lot of information from each of you on very good topics, and I appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. And to all the attendees, thank you also for being here today. I think we had a good several dozen people in the room, maybe even up to 40 at one point, so that's fantastic. And if you have any questions about STC or anything further about the positions in the field, the career opportunities, et cetera, we're all here to answer questions for you. So that's it, I guess. Thank you, everybody, for attending. And we'll see you next month. We have our next Knowledge Exchange on the last Monday of November. What month are we in? Yes, November. Can't believe the year has gone by that fast. So we'll hopefully see a bunch of you at that one. And if you have thoughts on future Knowledge Exchange ideas that you'd like to see us talk about or address, please feel free to send an email to stc@stc.org, and we'll be happy to consider it for a future panel. So Aaron, I think you can stop the recording and we'll let everyone have a great rest of the day.